All right. Hello again, and welcome to the Branson broadcast, where we re examine what everybody knows about the Bible. Today, we're going to talk about an aspect of the Bible that does not get as much attention as maybe it should. That aspect is found in Deuteronomy 29:29, to wit, the secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. Now, notice the first phrase. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. What secret things? If we think about what we know about the physical world, could we put a percentage on the amount of knowledge that we have on the universe? Well, no, because every time we find an answer to a question, we uncover a multitude more. That deals with the part of our existence that we can objectively study, the physical part, right? So, what about the spiritual part? How much do we know about that? Clearly, we know even less about that, even though we have this book that tells us all about it, at least in theory. Most Bibles have about 1,000 pages, give or take, unless they're a really small print, but even so, still going to be 850. That is a lot of information. However, John 21 tells us that even the world itself could not hold all of the books that could be written if we were to be told everything that only Jesus did, much less all of the works of the Almighty. For the moment, we're going to concern ourselves with three groups of people that I believe the final message of this broadcast can help. So see if you're in one of these three groups, and then wait for me to put it together at the end. All right, so our first group, I want to address people who are skeptical of the existence of God because it seems like things should be different if he existed, right? And the reason for that is that God is quite counterintuitive to a finite mind. Dr. Richard Dawkins, an eminent scientist and an atheist, let's be honest, has said a God capable of continuously monitoring and controlling the individual status of every particle in the universe cannot be simple. His existence is going to need a mammoth explanation in its own right. This is his version of the old "who created God" trope. And by using it, he admits that he cannot fathom something not having a beginning. He can't fathom it. None of us can. Not to pick on him because like I said, none of us can grasp that. Sure, we can imagine existing from now on, just like we continue to exist. Oh, I'm alive, just continue to live. How many of us, though, as children, for example, heard probably in Sunday school, that God had no beginning? God had no beginning, children. Did you know that? And then we would go home, we would sit and we would try to go backwards in time and imagine backwards and backwards and backwards even in our limited experience of life, go backwards and backwards in time until, at least in my case, I would go like this. I would just, it's like my brain would shut down briefly. Some would say it's still shut down, but no, just briefly it would shut down. And then I would go back to playing with my lawn darts or whatever. You young whippersnappers should Google those and be amazed that they were ever produced, much less legal. Anyway, my point is that just because we can't fathom God doesn't mean we can't know anything about him or understand him on a basic fundamental level. Like I said, stick with me to the end or skip ahead a couple of minutes if you want for me to tie this all together with my main point. Let's talk so that's the first group, the people who are skeptical of the existence of God. The second group, to any Jewish or Israeli listeners, whatever you like to call yourselves, who miraculously find themselves here. Yes, I know you are waiting for a Messiah who will deliver you from your enemies once and for all. You know the parts of the Torah, the prophets, whatever, that talk about that better than I do. However, let me suggest that God did not reveal his whole plan to you. Dr. Michael Heiser, whose scholarship is admirable and well beyond the range of this humble broadcast, has noted that the plan to have the Messiah, whoever he is, the plan to have the Messiah die on a cross could not have been spelled out in what Christians call the Old Testament, because then the principalities and powers of the underworld would have known not to crucify him, and that would have ruined the plan. Paul reveals in 1 Corinthians 2, 7 and 8, we declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And like I said, that would have ruined the plan. So he couldn't just spell it out in Isaiah, Jeremiah, wherever. No, there were bits and pieces scattered around like this. Now, can I be real for a second? Christians, now I'm talking to you. A lot of times I hear Christian preachers say, the Jews should have known that Jesus was the Messiah. The Old Testament has prophecies all over the place about him. Well, yeah, in hindsight, I'm a pretty good poker player once the cards have been revealed. But who could read this verse? It's from Isaiah. By his stripes we are healed. Of course, we who recognize Jesus as the Messiah, we understand that's a reference to the beatings that, the whipping that he took before he was crucified. It's a reference to that. But who's going to read that and say, oh, yes, that must be a reference to our Messiah? Nobody would have thought that. So back to the Jews, Israelis. So go ahead. Yes, please believe that the Messiah is coming to deliver you, because I believe that he is. I believe that he is still coming also in the future. But consider the fact that there is more to the plan that was necessarily hidden from you from all of us, for it to be carried out. Don't take my word for it. Please don't. Research any leading Jew who has come to this realization, study what he has written about it, what he has said about it, and see if it doesn't make sense. Please do that. You won't lose anything by doing that. So the first group, the skeptics; the second, the Jews, Israelis. For the third group, and this, I have been in this group. For anyone who is suffering under a heavy burden, anyone who is wondering, where is God in all of this suffering that we can see around us, or that we are personally experiencing or have experienced? So let me take you to 3 or 4 verses. First of all, we have in Job 38, 3 and 4. This is after Job complains about his situation, understandably, from our point of view. So let's not get too uppity with him. God says to Job, brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. I love the fact that God speaks sarcasm. Where were we? The obvious answer is we were nowhere to be found. So there's already a big gap in our knowledge. So that's Job 38. Isaiah 55 says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. So God thinks differently than we do, because he is fundamentally different in essence and nature from us. Is it any surprise, therefore, that he acts differently from us in a given situation? Often, if not usually, in ways we do not understand? This leads to the last one. I'm going to take a small liberty with the next verse, but I don't think it does violence to the text to do so, so hear me out. First, I'll read the whole verse. Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. An alternative reading of the first phrase is, we know that in all things God works together with those who love him to bring about what is good, with those who are called according to his purpose. There's a slight difference there, but in any case, now the liberty I want to take is to remove some of those subordinate clauses there in the middle and stay with basically the nucleus, if that makes any sense. What we are left with is this: we know that in all things God works for the good of his purposes. So saying it this way, it puts the emphasis on what is really going on and ties the three verses together like this. We were not there when the world began and had nothing to do with its creation. God was there and in fact did all of the creating. He, being different from us in essence and nature, will act in ways that are mysterious and even painful at times. However, we believe in faith that all will be done correctly in the end. Now, how do we tie this all in with our three groups? Well, think of it this way. Whatever your situation, whether skeptic, Jew, Israeli, or struggling believer, remember this. We understand about this much of of everything God has told us, right? How much more is there that he has not told us, and indeed cannot tell us because of the limitations of our material brains? Don't miss out on all of this because we can't fully understand this. Find the truth. If you want to find the truth, it is out there. Please look into what the Bible actually says. God be with you on your journey.